This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with IgniteNet. Today's host, Tony, will be presenting today, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit them in the question box, and Tony will answer them at the end of the presentation. Tony, I'm finished for now, so it is your turn to take over.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for attending this webinar. I'm going to focus this presentation on our 60 gigahertz Metrolink solution. And again, if there are any questions, just post them up at the end, and I'll be happy to answer them. All right. Sorry. Okay. So for those that don't know, IgniteNet is a company that started in 2013. And is a subsidiary of a company called Acton Technology Corporation. It's located in Taiwan. And IgniteNet's focus is on cloud-managed wireless, wired switching, and millimeter wave broadband products like the 60 gigahertz product we'll talk about in a little while. We've got offices all over the world. Our corporate headquarters is located in Irvine, California, in Southern California. We have some development offices throughout the U.S., Eastern Europe, and manufacturing and development people in Asia. IgniteNet provides a complete solution that's surrounded at its core with a cloud controller. So this cloud controller can be accessed from any type of device, mobile, a tablet, computer, web browser, and it controls all of our Wi-Fi devices, all of our switching products, and all of our millimeter wave stuff. And something unique that I think IgniteNet is doing amongst other vendors is this marketplace, where you can go and as a reseller or WISP or integrator, you can find over-the-top services there like marketing analytics, family safe cybersecurity protection for homes or small businesses, things like that. So content filtering. So you're adding these over-the-top services that you then offer to your end customers. So it's kind of a unique solution, all built around this Ignite cloud controller. We're going to talk about 60 gigahertz today, and one of the things that drives that product is this customer demand for higher bandwidth. So bandwidth demands are driven by many different marketing verticals and applications. Networks today and future networks just need to be fast, flexible. They need to support lots of users and devices. One of the things that we do to help this along is with millimeter wave, 60 gigahertz frequency band. So those that aren't familiar with this, 60 gigahertz and other millimeter wave technologies, they're all affected by rain. So there's this ITU rain region zone. It's hard to see the kind of outlines of the countries and stuff, but it basically predicts rain patterns in certain areas of the world. So you can use this type of information from the ITU to estimate availability of a link. So because 60 gigahertz is susceptible to rain, if you're in an area, let's say you're in like Miami, Florida, and it rains a lot there during hurricane season, the 60 gigahertz links would be susceptible to that type of rain. So we're giving you an ability to kind of gauge what your availability uptime would be, meaning 99% of the time or 99.9% of the time, how much you could expect uptime to be in that zone. Again, one of the unique things that we do with our 60 gigahertz radios is every radio has a 5 gigahertz radio built in. So in the case that it rains a lot in Miami that day, the 60 gigahertz link would drop, but the 5 gigahertz backup link would fail over and keep your link up and running. So traffic would still be passing. You would just get a slower speed from a gigabit of throughput with 60 gig technology down to, let's say, 400 or 450 megabits with the 5 gigahertz failover. So where does 60 gigahertz fit in the general scheme of things? So 24 gigahertz is very popular. It's also an unlicensed frequency band. There's less interference probability with 24 gig than there would be, for instance, at 5 gig, which interference is high because there's so much 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz frequencies. I'm sure many of you can try to access and connect to an access point wherever you are right now, and you see dozens of different radios So you don't have that problem with 60 gig, and you have it somewhat with 24 gig. Approximate speed distance, sorry, for 60 gig is, around 1 kilometer, about the same with 24 gig. 24 gig could go further at less than 5 nines. And really the takeaway from this slide here is the spectrum available. So you can see that nearly 90% of the available spectrum is in the 60 gigahertz frequency band. And on the right there, you'll see the interference potential between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. It's 93% potential of interference when you use those two frequency bands. So 60 gigahertz really is a way to get high speed, point-to-point backhaul connectivity with almost very little to no interference with anything else. The good thing about 60 gigahertz is after, let's say, 1 kilometer or so, even those same channels that you're using for your link can be used again, because after a certain point, the signal just dissipates. It doesn't keep propagating on. So our solution for 60 gigahertz comes in a couple flavors. There's point-to-point products and point-to-multipoint products for 60 gig. The Metrolink point-to-point product is a layer 2 transparent wireless bridging device. It gives you a gigabit of aggregate throughput. It could be managed standalone, or it could also be managed by our IgniteNet cloud controller. And like I said, these are available in point-to-point and point-to-multipoint. The hardware features of these devices are, they have 2 gigabit Ethernet ports. One of them is a PoE in port. There's a USB 2.0 port, which has some uses I'll explain later. The 60 gigahertz radio and antenna, as well as the 5 gigahertz radio and antenna, are built into the device. And there's dual firmware images in there. So if something happens to a current existing firmware, there's always a backup firmware built in. Some of the software features are an aiming tool. And this aiming tool is unique. It's a PDA device like iOS or Android software application that on your phone you would download, and then you would take a Bluetooth USB dongle and put it into the USB port of the radio, and that's going to help you for aiming the two radios. If you think about it, the larger 35 centimeter Metrolink product has a distance of 1.2, 1.3 kilometers, so around a mile. So this aiming tool is really, really necessary to help you get those two radios aligned correctly for maximum throughput. The point-to-point devices also act as clients in a point-to-multipoint mode. So there's a software configuration where you would set it to a master or a client mode. The devices all support jumbo packets with a maximum MTU size of 7912 bytes. They support VLAN pass-through and managed VLANs, and there's 128-bit AES encryption built in. So these charts we provide to customers to help them estimate that link uptime and availability based on the region that they're in, the RAIN region from that map I showed you earlier. These charts are for 60 gigahertz only. If anyone needs access to these availability charts, you could contact your sales rep over at Microcom, and I'm sure they can get in touch with me so I can provide all of the charts for all the different RAIN regions. But basically, we're providing these charts to show the 35 centimeter and the 19 centimeter size, what their availability is as far as 5 nines, 4 nines, 3 nines, and so on. And then the max distance you can expect, which would be in this chart here, where the availability line intersects with the purple line is representing that minimum receive level. So the advantage of Metrolink versus laying fiber. So last estimates we checked, it's about $25 per foot in an urban environment to lay fiber, or $82,000 per kilometer. The cost of Metrolink to cover that same 1 kilometer is less than $1,000 per kilometer, so 2% of the cost. So what we're finding is there's a couple of applications. Some people are using these as an alternative to laying fiber. Some people are setting up Metrolink links and then waiting for their fiber to be laid, and then the Metrolink stays there as a backup in case something happens to the fiber. So there's a lot of uses to replace Metrolink point-to-point solutions instead of laying fiber itself. Speed is the second question that we get all the time. What's the speed? A lot of WISPs are looking for ways to, increase the backhaul speed so they can provide higher levels of service to their customers. So we advertise Metrolink being 1 gigabit of aggregate bandwidth for the point-to-point link. We have customers that are reaching 1.2 gigabits of total bandwidth. So on average, you can expect at least a gigabit of throughput on a point-to-point link. And some application diagrams for where we're actually deploying these products today kind of help you out and understand better what it does. So as a hybrid fiber wireless deployment, you'd run a fiber line somewhere into an area, a neighborhood, into a school, or a small enterprise downtown in a urban area. And then you can use point-to-point and point-to-multipoint devices to connect different buildings in the city or different buildings on a school campus, right into a residential area where you run fiber into a single home, and then you can run point-to-multipoint and connect multiple homes in that area. The urban connectivity application is probably the primary one right now, where there's 2 buildings in the city and somebody wants to get an internet connection from building A to building B. And then maybe it's a hotel that's off to a corner and doesn't have any fiber connectivity. So this is a primary application for any kind of point-to-point millimeter wave technology. We have other products in our portfolio, like G.Fast, which is the technology, kind of the next generation of VDSL that lets you run gigabit speeds over category 3 cable. So let's say you have an old historic building that doesn't have Cat 6 cable or Cat 5 cable, it just has telephone wires, Cat 3 cable run throughout the building. We can use a point-to-point connection to get internet to the building, and then we can use the existing category 3 wires that are in there with G.Fast to provide gigabit speeds to offices, rooms, if it's a hotel, or just anywhere in the building that has, a telephone port with category 3 cable. So urban connectivity, definitely one of the primary applications for this type of solution. Outdoor surveillance is another one. There are a lot of cities, schools, hospitals, even outdoor events that are trying to put up surveillance cameras just for protection for the public that are attending these events and stuff. 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz frequencies are everywhere. So one of the ways to get around interference with those frequencies is to use a point-to-multipoint 60 gigahertz solution. And each of the cameras can be connected as a multi-point connection for 60 gig. And then they're getting higher speed bandwidth. They're able to transmit 4K video even. But the good part about this is there's no interference from any of these buildings that may have wireless networks or hotspots or whoever is popping up there in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So surveillance, outdoor surveillance is definitely a real key area for this. The product portfolio, in a nutshell, is Metrolink 60 gigahertz point-to-point. There's 2 versions. There's a 35 centimeter version, which is the larger one in the picture, and a 19 centimeter, which is the smaller. Max distance on the larger, I think I mentioned it before, is around 1.2, 1.5 kilometers. On the smaller one, it's around 800 meters, 600 to 800 meters. The Metrolink sector, this is the point-to-multipoint base station that you would set up, and it supports up to 8 clients today. And the goal is by the end of the year to get it up to 32 clients. But today the firmware only supports 8 clients. So in, let's say, that surveillance image that we mentioned before, you'd put one of these somewhere where you have an internet connection or a fiber run, and then you'd use the point-to-point connect radios above as all your multi-point clients. And that point-to-multipoint sector has a 30-degree beam width. So a lot easier to take a point-to-point client and kind of aim it over into that 30-degree beam. There's some other products used for these types of deployments. They would be the switches, right? There's an SFP, 24-port SFP switch, and a 24-port PoE switch, as well as the product on the bottom, which is a mixed media converter. So it's an interesting product. It works with other vendor products, not just our own, but basically we'll take DC power in and provide PoE power out, or SFP fiber in and then copper out. So it's a nice way to help installers. If you're mounting an antenna on a tower, then that tower is more than 100 meters high, you can't use copper anyway, you'd have to go to fiber. So we offer this mixed media converter to help those installations along. On the mounting side, and any of you that are familiar with the product today ships with this standard mount. And it has a couple of pole mount options, but basically we'll go from a 25 millimeter pole to an 80 millimeter pole. It's not really wall mounted. It really is designed to go onto a pole. It has an aiming range, vertical range of plus or minus 80 degrees and horizontal plus or minus 80 degrees. The wind survivability of this is around 75 miles per hour. So this is the standard bracket that comes with the product. We created a long-range precision bracket below because there are some people that hate this bracket and there are some people that love it. And in some of these installations, the wind was a lot higher than we expected, and so we created this product to be wind survivable in 125 mile an hour winds. And this long-range precision bracket is an optional add-on. It doesn't come with the product by default. It can go from a 45 millimeter pole to a 100 millimeter pole. It has an aiming range of plus or minus 12 degrees vertical and plus or minus 15 degrees horizontal. So some of you have probably used them. Some of you have used the standard mount and said, God, I wish they would come out with something else. So this is the answer to that, this long-range precision bracket. There are other accessories for Metrolink besides the bracket. One is the alignment scope, which is basically a rifle scope with crosshairs, and it has a custom mount that fits directly on top of any of the Metrolink radios to help you get it in the general vicinity of being directly aligned. And then the alignment tool down there on the bottom, which is what I mentioned before with that app, will help you zero it in so you can get the closest possible direct connection between those two point-to-point links. So from 60 gig futures, this is kind of the beginning for us. We've had some problems with hardware that we've worked through. Software is getting better and better every day, but right now the product is at a point where it's very stable, and people are deploying it a lot faster now in mission critical type applications. So lots of new stuff coming. There's faster speeds. There's more point to multi-point. And I think that there'll be some more friendly regulatory things opening up that will enable us to go even further from a distance perspective with some higher frequencies. I listed a couple of things that are on the horizon right now that people may find a little interesting. The next version of Metrolink will be what we call Metrolink 2.5. And it's targeted to start being released by the end of April this coming month. And it'll be basically the same footprint from a 35 centimeter dish and a 19 centimeter dish and a sector. But what it'll have is it'll have the ability to get throughput up to 2.5 gigabits aggregate bandwidth. And the distances will be a little further. They'll be 2.5 kilometers on the 35 centimeter dish. And that's done by changing some of the hardware, adding a 2.5 gig Ethernet port onto these devices, adding an SFP fiber port directly onto the device, so you don't need to have a media converter anymore. You can have copper and fiber connections. And that will come also in May. We'll release the 2.5 version of the sector. And that sector will go from being a 30-degree sector to a 90-degree beam forming sector. So we'll get a lot better connectivity out of that being 90 degrees on one device instead of having to use 3 of the current sectors to get 90-degree coverage. There's some other products that are planned later on. There's a lightweight client device, so you no longer will have to use the regular point-to-point radios as a client in point-to-multipoint. So we'll be able to bring the cost down and give you a specific, client device. There's an outdoor radio that's tri-band that we're planning for May. That's the MGTBO. Of course, these names will probably change as we get closer to launching them. But so that multi-gigabit tri-band Omni will give you 60 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and 2.4 gigahertz. So imagine you're going through a urban area and you're connecting point to point between buildings. You can also now provide 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz as connectivity options for just citywide Wi-Fi. There's, let's say, a larger version of that, multi-gigabit on the outdoor that will have 10 gigabits of throughput between 65 and 2.4, and it'll have multiple radios of each of those options. So there's a lot of new technology coming in the 60 gigahertz specific space, and then some, 5 gigahertz and 2.4 options for outdoor client access as well as point-to-point, point-to-multipoint backhauling. And that's it. I would open it up to any questions anybody has.
Hi, Tony. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I do believe we've got some questions. Let me read some of them off to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about where the product is manufactured?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned before, IgniteNet is a subsidiary of Acton Technology Corporation. So these products right now are manufactured in Taiwan. So we have 2 facilities, one in Shenzhen in China and one in Hsinchu in Taiwan. So all Metrolink products are manufactured in Taiwan right now.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us a little bit more about the hardware features on the Metrolink 60 gigahertz?
More about the hardware features, as in like antenna. I'm not sure what more about the hardware.
No problem. Let's see here. I have a question here. Is it a standalone device or does it depend on other devices?
Oh, okay. So no, all the radios are standalone. So like the 60 gigahertz point-to-point client obviously requires another client to complete a point-to-point link, but everything is built into the radio itself. The antennas, the radios, all of the ports, everything is all standalone and closed in an outdoor weatherproof enclosure.
Thank you, Tony. Let's see, we've got a question here. It says, are the hardware bugs worked out completely? Because it's a great product, but it's hard to jump on board again.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer to that question is yes. And 3 months ago, I wouldn't even be able to answer the question. We did a revision of the hardware to what we call an R5 internally, and basically we found an upstream component on the older version that was creating this problem where the links wouldn't stay connected or they would reboot on their own. We've spent the last couple of months replacing all the channel inventory and replacing all of the end customer inventory for anyone that had one deployed. So, we're in the process of swapping everything out, but the customers that are receiving the newer versions are all reporting what we expect, that everything is more stable now and it stays connected and it runs as it should. So the answer is yes right now. And if you have an older version, we should talk to your sales rep at Microcom or call me directly at IgniteNet, and we'll try to figure out how to get you a replacement and swap out the units that you have.
Thank you, Tony. Can you tell us a little bit about your customer service department?
Yes, so our customer service department is located in Atlanta, Georgia. And we've got 3 people there, I think, right now that are handling customer service requests. And they can be reached by, I think, emailing customer service at IgniteNet.com or support at IgniteNet.com.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that wonderful presentation and for answering those questions. I also like to thank everyone for attending today. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view these products mentioned or shown today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And please remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and it will be uploaded to the Microcom YouTube channel. So to reference it again, you can view it again on YouTube. Thank you again, Tony, and thank you everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Yeah, thank you all.
Welcome.